So you've got your first ball python, or you're about to, and you're looking to see how to set it up, what little things need to go into it, and how to do it properly. Stick around because that's what I'm going over today. All right, so ball pythons. What are the key points of importance to how to set them up? What are the key things to kind of keep in mind? Let's go off of the husbandry basics. Temperature, humidity, and enclosure. Temperature. All right, so the first one. Ideally, I recommend that you would have the temperature on one half of your enclosure be in the mid to upper 80-degree temperatures. So I usually aim for 86 to 88 degrees, somewhere in that range. Just warm enough that the animal can digest properly, and not too warm that they're going to be agitated and feel sick, and different stuff like that. Conversely, if it's too cold, they'll also feel sick and they won't digest properly either. But yeah, you want half of their tank to be warm, and then you want the temperature to kind of fade in a gradient through the rest of their tank. That way, if the snake wants to be a little bit cooler, he can move away. And if he wants to be a little bit warmer, he can move back to that optimum temperature range. All right, next, humidity. So a good level of humidity for your enclosure should be around 60 to 70%. That's what I would recommend of humidity. So now humidity is important for a couple reasons. The most notable one that you'll realize right away is that your snakes typically will shed a little bit better when they have a proper level of humidity. But it can also help prevent some respiratory illnesses if you have that humidity level at a good spot. Now, when I started keeping ball pythons, I was a little bit overly concerned about the humidity in my enclosures. I was a little bit too worried about keeping it right on the money, right at 60% or right at 70%. And I was definitely overly worried, and I got frustrated. But what I came to realize over time is that there's a certain period of time that it's more ideal and important to have that humidity level be raised to the 60-70%. And that would be, if you notice your snake's going into shed, then bump up the humidity a little bit. Maybe if you have a substrate in there that can withhold a little bit of moisture, like a cocoa husk or something like that, you can dampen it a little bit during that week and a half time period when they are going through their shed. After that snake goes through that shedding cycle, you can kind of not worry too much about the humidity. Not that you don't want to be concerned about it at all, but you can let stuff dry out. It's okay if it gets a little bit dry. If things are too wet and too moist all the time in your snake enclosure, you're going to run into other issues, like they'll start getting respiratory illnesses, they'll get belly, scale rot, they'll get mold or bacteria growing inside their tubs or tanks. So it's kind of important to let things dry out a little bit when it's not as necessary. My rule of thumb would be when the snake's going in the shed and you see that it's shedding, I would recommend that during those week and a half time period, you take extra measures to kind of keep that humidity level raised. And then after that, just kind of let it dry out a little bit and just make sure they have clean water to drink, because that also helps them stay hydrated. But you don't need to worry about the humidity all the time, every single day. It can be fluctuating a little bit, and it's not the end of the world as long as you keep it from getting bone dry, and then you'll have snakes shedding really bad. You don't want to get to that point. All right, now the last one would be the enclosure. So there's multiple ways that you can do this. You don't have to keep a snake in a tank. You don't have to keep a snake in a tub. My first ball python I kept in a bioactive tank because that's what he came to me in. And I had him in that for over a year, and it worked. It wasn't great, and I feel like since kind of adjusting his care in the enclosure that we're using, certain things got better as far as his eating and different stuff like that more consistently. But there's multiple ways that you can do it. And to some extent, bioactive is kind of tricky, and it's kind of not easy. So I wouldn't recommend it to somebody right off the bat to jump right into a bioactive type of setup. Not that you can't. So you want to have your snake in an enclosure that is sized to the size of the snake. If you have a young juvenile baby ball python, keep it in a smaller enclosure with multiple hides. Hides on the cold side, hides on the warm side. The enclosure doesn't necessarily have to be 2 or 3 times the size of the snake, especially at that age. Typically when they're younger, they're a little more prone to being stressed out and feel exposed if there's too much room and space around them. They kind of like little hides all throughout that they can kind of tuck away and coil up and kind of just chill for a while. As the animal grows and gets a little bit bigger, you do need to increase the size of your enclosure. You don't want to keep them in a small 10-gallon thing as they're an adult. You need to size them up as they go. I have multiple different size tubs for multiple different age animals. I would recommend that you put it into a size that fits them comfortably, that they can stretch out fully, and then coil up on one side. It also helps give them a gradient of temperature too, which we talked about. One final thing that I do want to talk about, and that's the feeding of the animals. I'm going to make a future video that's just going to be just on this topic so I can give more details, tips and tricks, things I've learned over time that I can give to anybody who's interested in learning about it. But I just want to make a couple points. So when your animal's a younger juvenile ball python, you should be feeding that animal a meal once a week, approximately. And then it should be the ideal size where you just see a little bit of a lump in the animal. About the thickness of the animal is about the thickness of the meal that they should be eating once a week. As that animal grows up and becomes more of an adult in a year or two, they should start to dial back that feeding a little bit, maybe once every 2 weeks. Their digestion slows down, their metabolism slows down, and it's not as necessary for them to eat that frequently. Otherwise, then you'll come into problems with overfeeding your animal and obesity, and that's not good for the animal either. And that's going to be it for this video for now. So if you found that helpful, or you learned something, or appreciated it, please consider liking the video. Leave a comment if you have a question or you have something that you would like to add to it. And if you're interested in any future videos that we might put on this channel as we go, consider hitting that subscribe so that you'll get notifications and different stuff like that, and we can all learn and grow together. So have a good rest of your week. Don't stop learning.